Hello everyone and welcome back to Kobean History. Today I'm starting a new series all about siege warfare. As you might know, a few years ago I made a whole series about all the defensive elements of a castle. And now I want to expand onto that by talking about all the ways you could try and capture a castle, or a fortified town for that matter. In each video of this series, I will cover a distinctive tactic which could be used to capture a fortification. These will range from the classical siege engines, artillery, undermining, covert missions, and even medieval biological and chemical warfare. So if you want to stay tuned and follow as this series progresses, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button so you get notified when I upload. Now there will be a lot of different videos in this series, as there are many different ways to assault a castle. So if you want to have a vote as to what topic I cover next, you can become a YouTube channel member or a supporter on my Patreon. With that out of the way, as this is the first episode in this series, I will go over the topic of why you would want to besiege a castle instead of just going around it. The obvious answer is because you want to control what's inside of the fortification. Castles or fortified towns were often the center of power of a region, where the governing administration or ruler of the area is based out of. So in capturing it, you can utilize the existing infrastructure to impose your own control over the area. But not all castles or fortified towns served this purpose, and your end goal may lay beyond that fortification. So why waste your time and manpower besieging these rather than going straight to your end goal and bypassing these side castles? Now it is worth noting that this was actually done. Not all armies would capture all the fortifications on the road to their goal. And as we'll see in an example later on, not capturing these castles might disadvantage you later on in your campaign. Let's say your target lays deep within enemy lands. If you go straight towards it, ignoring the fortifications you pass along the way, it could land you in some trouble. Castles are often thought of as purely defensive structures, but they can be used offensively as well. If you bypass them, their garrison could venture out, follow you and attack you from behind. If you're not able to overcome this force, that would trap you within enemy territory with no safe route that you can use to retreat. Alternatively, the castle you bypass might have only a small force within it, which is not enough to pose a real threat to your main force. But even then, they could launch raids and ambushes to chip away at your army bit by bit, and retreat back to the safety of their castle before you have time to respond. Most vitally, they could attack your supply line as it makes its way through their lands, and with less supplies making it to your army, it would weaken your troops. And if they managed to cut off your supply line altogether, you would have no choice but to retreat back to your own lands. Now of course you could raid the enemy lands for their supplies, but that wouldn't be able to sustain a large army indefinitely. If you had besieged and captured that castle, not only would you be able to protect yourself against attacks from behind, but in the case you do need to retreat later on, the captured fortification could serve you as a place to fall back to, or it could be used as a base of operations to plan further attacks into enemy territory. Castles or fortified towns could also house supplies, valuable goods, a workforce, and often served as a center to control the surrounding farmland. You might raid the outlying villages and farms, but often the citizens, along with their valuables, would seek shelter in the nearby fortifications. Instead of raiding the area, you could capture the fort to get more out of it, as you could then control the area around it to support your war effort and supply your troops in the long term. Another reason why you might have to capture a castle could be because there is simply no other way around it. Castles were often built in strategic positions, such as to protect a mountain pass or defend a river you might need to traverse in order to get to your end goal. If this was the case, you would have no choice but to take control of these choke points in order to advance. A good example of why capturing castles is important can be taken from the last Mongol invasion of Hungary. Having been ravaged by the Mongols previously, Hungary decided to fortify their lands with castles. When the raiders eventually returned, they found villages abandoned and their population, supplies and even livestock sheltered within the nearby castles. Not wanting to expend their time and resources besieging these fortifications, they trekked further into the Hungarian lands. But they found similar situations in the rest of the country. Not being able to supply their troops with the little resources that were left outside of the fortifications meant the advance was running out of steam. And what's more is that the garrisons of these castles would periodically sally out and attack the Mongols from behind, chipping away at their forces until they were eventually defeated and driven from Hungarian lands. This also highlights that castles don't need to be impregnable in order to be effective. Many castles weren't and still managed to hold out from attacks, and others that claimed to be impregnable did end up falling in the end. Castles that styled themselves as impregnable were often very expensive to build. You can take Chateau Gaillard as an example. It cost so much money to construct that several more standard castles could have been built with the same funds. Richard the Lionheart, who designed the castle, claimed that it was so well designed that even if the walls were made out of butter, the castle still wouldn't have been able to be conquered. Yet in the end, the castle ended up falling anyway after a 6-month siege. The point being that a castle isn't meant to be indestructible. No matter how well it's designed or built, eventually all castles could succumb to starvation or a lack of resources if besieged long enough. The real purpose of a castle was to pose as much of a hassle as possible to take, as to either deter the enemy from even trying, or at least keep the attacking force occupied long enough for your reinforcements to arrive and lift the siege. There are many ways to capture a fortification, and as many ways to defend against those tactics. My aim in this series is to cover all tactics, and how to defend against them. The next topic in this series will be trickery and deception, which has been chosen by my patrons. So if you want to have a vote in which topics I cover next, make sure to check out my Patreons or members page. On screen right now is a link to the playlist, as well as my video on castle defenses. I would like to thank my patrons for their support, especially my $25 patron G. David.